All right, well, Greg mentioned that my name's Mike and last name's Chaplin, and it's always kind of interesting when I get a call from Greg and he wants to know if I want to preach, and I'm always a little tentative when that happens, because sometimes there's a lot of new people here, and I see a lot of new faces this week, and I'll just say this, that if you don't like what you hear, I encourage you to come back and hear Greg, and if you do like what you hear, then that's awesome, because that means you're very easy to please, and you'll really be happy with what Greg has to say when he gets to preach. But I always enjoy it because this really, and I've told you guys this before, when I get an opportunity to set up here, it's really a therapy session for me, because it never fails that when I get a call from Greg, there's some things going on in my life that God's working with me about. And through that process of getting things ready, he just leads me into conversations with him, and he teaches me things, and he guides my thoughts, and that's kind of been what it's like while I've been working on this. Because it's been an interesting couple months at the Chaplin household. You see, I have this plan that I've been working on, and the plan started several years ago when I decided that I wanted to change my career and do something different. Kind of just tired of doing the same thing that I've been doing for a long time, and before you write me off as somebody going through a midlife crisis or something, I haven't bought a two-seater sports car, and I haven't ditched my wife Allison for some 20-year-old blonde named Fifi or anything like that. But it's more of just feeling like I really need to do something different. I need to do something different for myself. And so I began this plan because I'd owned my own print shop for 26 years. And if you've ever been around printing, you'll know why I'm ready to do something different, because there's lots of demands and there's lots of pressures on you to get things done and to meet those deadlines and things like that. And I'm looking for a different kind of a challenge. And so I started this process, and I knew the first thing I had to do was sell my business. So I sold my business 3 years ago. Part of the deal was that if they bought it from me, that I would come to work for them at least for 3 years. And so I had to sign a 3-year contract. And so the plan was in motion. Got the business sold. Step one, check that off the list. And kind of moving on down the line, the plan involved us moving up here to Lincoln, and that we really wanted to end up here in Lincoln. And I'll just say that, I made some compromises there, and because there's lots of places that I would like to live, and Lincoln's one of them. But there were other places too that we thought about and talked about. And so then the next step was that we put the house up for sale. Okay, so here's the timeline. Okay, my contract ended up, it runs out the end of May. So in February, we say, okay, well, here we are. We better get our house on the market and get ready for this plan to take place that we've executed, and we're going to go right down the line. And so we put our house on the market, and a few weeks later, we have an offer, a solid offer. Somebody that, boy, it's a done deal, our realtor tells us, definitely going to happen. Make your plans now. You better get ready now. And so we're like, hey, well, God is sure, boy, he's really blessing us here, and we're going to head down that road. And then that fell through. The sure deal was not so much a sure deal, And so it kind of fell through, and we were disappointed, but that was okay, because, it was early, it had only been a few weeks, and so we had another open house, and in Beatrice, we had 28 people come through the house, which is pretty amazing for an open house in Beatrice. And our realtor, who's been a realtor for a long time, he's like, that's more people than I've had in 40 years of selling real estate. And so out of that, then, we have more than one offer. Now we have a multiple offer. And we have another offer. And the offer is for what we're asking for it. And so we're like, wow, here we are again. And this last week, we found out that all fell through. And then the second offer couldn't wait to find out what the first offer was going to do. And so they bought a different house. Oh yeah, and the job thing. April 1st, I told them that I was done, that I would be done May 2nd, because I had 4 weeks vacation, and so it would run through the contract and everything. Guess what? I'm still there. And it's kind of amazing, because the guy that was supposed to transition into my job, the guy that we had hired to replace him, fell and broke his hip while running the press. Crazy. But he did. And so it's going to be another 8 weeks probably before he gets back. And so I'm still there. So in case you're wondering, the plan, this great plan that I had, well, it's not going so great. And so when I heard from Greg this last week that he wanted me to preach, I knew immediately that God had set me up for this. And so this morning I want us to talk about something that I really don't want to talk about, but I need to talk about. And I know that some of you are in the same position that I'm in, and that you need to talk about as well, and that's to talk about waiting. Don't you hate to wait? I think there's a reason why the word hate rhymes with wait. It just seems to kind of flow together. It's all kind of there. Hate, wait. It just kind of flows off your tongue. And it makes sense because we live in a time where things are fast and things move quickly, and we're not very patient, and we really hate to wait. We have all these great inventions, like the microwave and the automatic washer and dryer and all those things that were supposed to simplify our life, but instead of it really simplifying our life, it just gave us more time to cram more things into our life and stay busy. And the busier we get, the harder it is for us to wait for anything. We've started to really believe that faster is better. You remember that, I'm going to date myself here a little bit, but you remember the old dial-up internet that you used to have to do, and you'd hit the dial-up and then the thing would make all of its little tones and then finally go, and then it would do some more tones, and then finally, you were up on this really fast internet. And now we're at this point where if our GPS high-definition cell phone does not download that 100 meg video, in 2 seconds we're ready to throw it against the wall because we're so frustrated because we had to wait. And I'll even date myself more, because how many of you remember the Heinz ketchup commercial back in the 1970s? I know some of you weren't even born yet, but that's okay, because I'll tell you what it was. The Heinz ketchup commercial, it had Carly Simon, and those of you that don't know about the 70s, maybe you know about Carly Simon, but she sang the song Anticipation, and that was playing in the background as they show this ketchup bottle, and it's trying to ooze out this thick Heinz ketchup. And you were hungry by the time you got done watching it, because they show this hamburger and fries and it's just slowly pouring out, and it looks so good. And the tagline at the end of it was, "The taste that's worth the wait." And it's kind of interesting because 20 years later, they came out with another commercial with the same music in the background, but this time it was to introduce the squeeze bottle. And the squeeze bottle, it comes right out. And you know, the tagline was, "The taste without the wait." And Heinz made a lot of money selling that ketchup. And we've become kind of quickaholics, where we're dependent on getting what we want and when we want it. But there are times in our life when we have to wait. We can have the best plans. I mean, I like to see a problem, develop a plan, and fix it. That's just kind of how I operate. And that's how I've operated in the business that I was in for a long time. And that's how I still kind of manage things where I'm at right now. I like to make a plan, execute the plan, fix it. That's how I feel comfortable. That's how I feel good. And when I get those plans like I'm in right now, and it's not executing, I'm kind of uncomfortable, and I don't like it. But I do believe that it's in those moments, those waiting moments, that God sometimes really stirs our hearts. And He takes those moments when He causes us to pause, and we suddenly realize that maybe that plan should have been something we should have discussed with Him. Maybe that plan should have been a part of our prayer life. Maybe that plan should have been really asking for guidance. Because I'll tell you, I prayed about the plan, but this week, as I really thought about this, I really realized that my prayer was more like giving God the instructions on what He needed to do to fulfill my plan. You see, and I really believe that sometimes God just hits those pause buttons and He makes us wait. You know, and I believe that because the Bible's full of examples of God making people wait. Abraham and Sarah, you know, really from the time that God said to Abraham, "You are going to be a father of many," it was 25 years before Isaac was born. Jacob waited for a bride, if you're familiar with that story. I mean, he wants to marry this gal, Rachel, and so he gets tricked. He works for 7 years for a guy who tricks him, gives him the sister, Leah. He still wants to be married to Rachel, and so he works another 7 years. Just doesn't seem right. Joseph waited in prison. Noah waited 150 days to get off the ark. I don't know if you've ever been on a boat, let alone with lots of animals. 150 days is a long time. The children of Israel waited 40 years to enter the promised land. David waited about 15 years to become king. So we really shouldn't be surprised that at times in our lives, God maybe hits the pause button and makes us wait. And this morning, I want you to consider this, because this is kind of where I've been this week. That waiting is a tool that God uses sometimes to shape us and to strengthen our faith and to help us to recognize the fact that we really are dependent upon Him. And there's a story in John 11 that really illustrates the whole waiting thing. And I want us to look at that, because out of that passage, I think you'll kind of see what we're talking about. And I want you to look at some things this morning that I hope you can relate to. I hope that you can find yourself in that place. But John chapter 11, beginning with verse 1, it says this: "Now a man named Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, 'Lord, the one you love is sick.' When he heard this, Jesus said, 'The sickness will not end in death. No, it is for God's glory, so that God's Son may be glorified through it.' Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. Yet, when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 days. You see, it was very evident that Jesus purposely made Mary and Martha wait. You know, he could have just simply done like he did with the centurion and said to the messenger, "Go back, Lazarus is healed." Just like he did with the centurion when he said, "Go back, your son is healed." But his response was not really what Mary and Martha expected. And to them, it just didn't make any sense. But you see, God was at this point where he was going to make them wait so he could do something really great. And that's a process that's really kind of hard to digest sometimes. When we read it in the Bible, it's easy for us to just read it and go, yeah, that's really okay. That's neat, you know. I don't really understand why he did it, but that's okay. But I want us to really kind of look at this a little bit, and in order to understand that process, I want us to get a handle on what it is that makes us hate to wait. And I really believe these things are common with all of us. Maybe some of us have more trouble with waiting than others, but I think all of us have a problem with waiting. And the first thing is that waiting is hard. It actually helps to say it in a whiny voice. Waiting is hard. You know, that actually helps a little bit to get the grasp of what I'm trying to say. That no matter what the circumstance is, even in a really great time of your life, if you're put in a position of waiting, it's hard. Trying to get to church this morning, I'm coming up here. You know, I'm way ahead of schedule. I'm going to be in great shape, and I waited. And I waited, and I waited, and I finally turned around and tried to jog all over Lincoln trying to get around the marathon runners, and had to wait some more times. And I finally made it. And so even in good times, it's hard to wait. But it's even harder when you combine your situation with stress and worry. That burden of waiting gets a lot heavier, and the load just seems to start to buckle your knees a little bit. And like in the story Lazarus, when we are in pain and suffering, waiting for help can cause us to really lose hope. You know, there's nothing more self-centering than when a person is in pain. Our heart and our mind and our soul's focus is on getting rid of that pain and getting rid of it now. And you know, there's different kinds of sufferers. I really realized this here a couple of weeks ago. I had to go to Philadelphia to look at some equipment, and when I was coming back, I had to sit way in the back of the plane. And we're landing in Memphis, and it wasn't a rough ride or anything. I mean, it was a smooth landing, but we were clear in the back of the plane, and there was doing a little sideways action as we're coming down. And right across the aisle from me was this really young Asian girl. And she's sitting there, and out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that she's starting to get sick. And I see her reach for the little bag that they keep in front of you. And I see her open it up. And she used it. And she folds it up. And she took a napkin and did this. And I don't think anybody else even realized that she was sick. She suffered so quietly. That's not me. I mean, when I am sick, I want to moan. I want to groan. It's best if I'm alone where I can just wallow around and toss and turn and just get up and walk around and just, ugh. And I'll guarantee you that if that would have been me on that airplane, everybody from the first class seat up by the pilot all the way to the people behind me would have known that I was just about ready to hurl, because that's just how I am. And when I suffer, it's not so much that I want people to know about it, but it just makes me feel better if I can just be verbal about it and just kind of moan a lot. And thank you, Allison, for not saying amen to that. Luckily, I'm not sick that often. But when we are in pain, we want it to stop. And it doesn't matter whether we're quiet or loud, we want it to stop now. And no matter whether it's physical pain or emotional pain, when it happens in a situation where we have to wait, and we have to wait for it to pass, that suffering is hard, and waiting is hard. The second thing that I think causes us to hate to wait is that waiting makes us feel powerless. Waiting actually reminds us just how powerless we really are. It reminds us that we aren't God, and the truth of the matter is that we are not in control of the situation. Now I want to ask you, and I want you to be truthful with me. Have you ever thought how awesome it would be to be your own God of your own world? Am I the only one that's ever thought that way? I mean, I would love that. It would be awesome, because you see, in Mike's world, there would be no hard times. In Mike's world, there would be none of this waiting stuff. In Mike's world, you wouldn't have to work hard in order to get something. No, you just want it and you'd have it. You see, in Mike's world, Mike would get a phone call from Bo Pelini, and he would say, "Hey, Mike, I was at a garage sale here a few weeks ago, and I came across these VCR tapes." Ask if you're not old enough to know what those are. Ask somebody. But a VCR tape, and I came across this football game where number 63 in this football game tackles this guy, causes a fumble, picks up the fumble, zigs and zags down the field, and runs all the way for a touchdown. And I found out that 63 is you, and I want you to come play football for us now, because Aaron Green left and we need a new return man. And you see, in Mike's world, then I would go to Nebraska, and I would, on my very first kickoff, I would set a new record for a 99-yard return for the oldest guy to ever return a football that far. It would be amazing. I would go into the end zone, and I would do what I've always thought would be so much fun for all the old people in this world, where I would do the Walker shuffle after I did the touchdown. I would spike the ball and do this, and the whole crowd. It would set pacemakers off in nursing homes around the country as people witnessed that. And finally, ESPN would have something new to replace Johnny Rodgers' run. Aren't you tired of watching that? No, I'm not either. But anyway, in Mike's world, it would replace that. And in Mike's world, Simon Cowell would call, and he would have seen that to Walker Shuffle and thought, hey, we need somebody cool, somebody gray-haired to do my next TV talent show. And so he would call me up and he'd say, hey, Mike, I see you're really cool. Would you be willing to be on television on my new talent show? It's American Postmenopausal, and we're going to send you and Paula Abdul and Randy Jackson to nursing homes around the country, and you're going to find talent there, and you're going to be our cool gray-haired guy. That's in Mike's world. I mean, doesn't it make you want to live in Mike's world? You see, it would be all about Mike. It would be all about bringing glory to Mike, and none of this waiting stuff. But the reality is, in this world where God reigns, where God is God, so many times His glory moments come when dreams have been crushed, and when families are in crisis, or when people find themselves feeling alone and hurting. And it's in those moments of waiting that the glory shifts from Mike to the one who deserves that glory, and that glory goes to God because now I admit that He's the one that deserves it. The truth is that sometimes we don't like God's glory plans. Not if they involve our suffering. Not if they involve waiting on God and wondering if He's ever going to act. Not if it disrupts our plans and our dreams. And there's nothing that makes you feel more helpless and so vulnerable than to stand by the bedside of somebody that you love and watch them die, and you can't do anything about it. And that's the waiting moment that we find Mary and Martha in. Lazarus is in his bed. He's burning with fever and growing weaker and weaker each day. And Mary sits by his side, and she's holding his hand and crying and praying. And Martha, the busybody, she gets up and she goes from the bed out to the porch to look down the road to see if Jesus is coming. And everybody in that room is thinking the same thing. Jesus is coming. It's not too late. I know He'll come. It's not too late. It's not too late. He'll be here. But He doesn't come. That's a tough wait. Have you been there? Feeling all alone, feeling just powerless is a tough place to be. And when we feel that way, in that moment, it's easy to feel the next thing that we hate about waiting. And that is that waiting can make us feel abandoned. When you're in that position of being totally powerless and you beg and you plead and you bargain with God, you promise to go to church every Sunday, you're going to put $1 in the plate every Sunday, you're going to do all the things that you think God expects from you, and yet what you expect to happen and what you want to happen doesn't happen. It's easy to feel like God has just turned His back on you. And when you're in those moments, if you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. Isn't it hard to stay faithful to a God that you don't feel has been faithful to you? It's in those moments that people cry out to God, sometimes mad. And Mary and Martha had to be thinking that way. After everything they had done to help Jesus, whenever He would come to their house, they would take care of Him. They would wait on Him. They supported His ministry. They put their lives on the line for Him. They had seen Him heal perfect strangers. And yet, when Lazarus needs Him, He doesn't come. That attitude had to be flying around that house after Lazarus died. That feeling, don't put them up there as these superhuman heroes of the Bible that didn't have any feelings. These people were hurting. And those are dark moments. And those are sad times. But here is a profound truth in a very simple statement. And that is that waiting takes time. And when you think about that, you just want to say, well, duh, Mike. Yeah, waiting takes time. But it's important to understand that. It's kind of like it's kind of like being pregnant. Now, I can't talk from firsthand knowledge, but I've been around pregnant women before. And can you imagine going into pregnancy expecting it to be over in a week? You know, you say, okay, well, here's the little test. Oh, I am pregnant. Okay. And then come Friday, go, hey, what's going on? Where's my baby? You know, what's the deal here? By the time you got done, you would be so strung out and just feeling horrible. But you go into it expecting it to take 9 months. And even then, you're doing everything you can those last few weeks to just encourage this child to come out early. It's really nice out here. Come on out. I'll buy you something special if you'll just come out now. And we do all kinds of crazy things to try and make it happen. And it's hard enough, but we make the mistake so many times where we expect God to meet our timelines, and that doesn't happen. And we expect God to surrender to our plans. And when He doesn't, that's when we feel like we've been abandoned and that He's left us high and dry. But God's timing is not the same as our timing. If we go back to that scripture verse, it says, then Jesus said to His followers, let's go back to Judea. And the followers said, but teacher, some people there tried to stone you to death only a short time ago. Now you want to go back there? And Jesus answered, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. The followers said, wait a minute, but Lord, did you not hear what we said? If he is only asleep, he'll be all right. Send him an alarm clock. Jesus meant that Lazarus was dead, but his followers thought he meant Lazarus was sleeping. So then Jesus said plainly, Lazarus is dead. And I am glad for your sakes I was not there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him now. You see, Mary and Martha thought that Jesus was going to come back and heal another person. And the disciples, in their mind, they thought it was crazy to go back because somebody might kill him. But in God's timing, Jesus was going for a purpose. And that purpose was to prove to everyone that He had power over death. And when our timing and God's timing don't match up, it may seem that God has abandoned us, and when we feel abandoned, it's really easy to fall into this last thing that we hate, and that is that waiting makes us feel confused. You know, you and I think that we have it all together when things are just going great. I mean, we are really pretty independent people when we're living the rosy life. But when our plans get messed up and our life gets turned upside down and things start going bad, have you ever found yourself asking questions like, does God really love me? Am I doing something wrong? Why is this happening to me? But trusting God in those confusing times is hard to do. But true hope does not come only from just believing in God, but it also comes from accepting and trusting His timing. We want His comfort. We want His power. But a lot of the times, we don't want His calendar. We want our calendar and His calendar to sync up and be exactly the same. And I love what Mark Batterson wrote in his book, The Wild Goose Chase. He says this, I tend to live the way I drive. I want to get from point A to point B in the shortest amount of time and by the easiest route possible. But I've come to realize that getting where God wants me to go isn't nearly as important as becoming who God wants me to be in that process. And God seems to be far less concerned with where I am going than with who I'm becoming. And that's such an important thing to grasp to avoid that confusion that can happen. You know, we're interested in getting our problems solved so we can return to our normal life. But what if God doesn't want us to return to our normal life? What if he wants us to have more faith? What if he wants us to have true hope in real things that matter? And he loves us enough that he will leverage anything in our lives to make that happen. Now, am I saying that God sends all kinds of turmoil into people's lives and causes all these terrible things to happen to people? No, that's not what I'm saying. But I am saying that God will absolutely use situations that we are in to detach things that we've grabbed onto and are holding tight to and move our hands to him. Mary and Martha had no idea that because they had to wait, that because they had to suffer, that because they had to watch their brother die, that people's lives were going to be changed forever. They had no clue that something totally amazing that had never been done was about to happen. God, he conquered death through his son, and it marked the future for our lives still today. And I don't know where you're at in your life right now. And I don't know, maybe you're not waiting on anything. Maybe everything's just flowing down the pipe for you right now. And that's awesome. Enjoy that time. But I do pray that if you're in that moment and you're confused and you're feeling abandoned and you're just hurting, that you will know that you are not alone. That God is there, and He's wanting to hold you. He's wanting to reach out to you. And as the worship band comes on up, I have one last thing that I just want you to understand when it comes to this waiting thing. It's something that it really struck me as I was getting ready to do this today. And that is that Jesus really does understand waiting. Because when you look at the story of Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane, you see probably one of the most gut-wrenching, hardest stories in the Bible of somebody waiting. Here Jesus is, and he goes and takes his disciples, and he goes off to this place by himself, and it says that he is in such agony that he's sweating as if drops of blood, and he's suffering because he knows the pain and the agony that he's waiting to have happen. And even he says, God, if there's any way that this cannot happen to me, make it so. But then he says, but not what I want, what you want. And man, that is an amazing point to get. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not there yet. There's a big part of me that's hanging on my plan. But this has been a good week for me to really sit back and look and say, God, not what I want, but what you want. And that's a scary thing. On the way up here, I heard a song that I've heard before, but I had never really listened to the words in this context. And it's a song by Mercy Me called The Hurt and the Healer. And the lyrics say, so here I am, what's left of me, where glory meets the suffering. I'm alive, even though a part of me has died. Breathe. Sometimes it's all I can do. pain so deep I can hardly move. Just keep my eyes completely fixed on you. Lord, take hold and pull me through. It's the moment when humanity is overcome by majesty, when grace is ushered in for good, and all our sins are understood, when mercy takes its rightful place, and all these questions fade away, when out of weakness we must bow and hear you say, it's over now.